everybody. I want to welcome Rose to this program. And Rose Weiler is a recruiter. She helps small businesses around the Green Bay and Appleton area with their onboarding and recruiting needs. And she's been doing this for a little while, actually longer than a little while. And I'm excited to talk with you today, Rose, because you've got some wonderful insights around the idea of employer transparency I want to dive into. So welcome, Rose.
Great, thank you. So glad to be here.
So when we talked ahead of this show, we had a bunch of topics that I said you could talk about, and you zoomed in on this idea of employer transparency, and then specifically the idea of employer pay transparency. So what do you mean, first of all, by transparency? And then let's go from there, I guess, and dive into pay transparency.
Sure, yeah. So transparency, I think we're all probably familiar with the word in some way or another, but, you hear more and more about organizations who, or candidates who are looking for more transparency from organizations. Mm-hmm. So one of those ways is obviously pay. Nobody essentially wants their time wasted, candidates or employers. So, being as upfront and open about the pay range, maybe what a typical pay might be for that position. The more information, obviously, you can give them that, the more you can target, who you're looking for and kind of weed people out or attract them right from the get-go. Mm-hmm. But some other things that companies have found a lot of success in besides pay transparency is really discussing the challenges of the job. That really can eliminate a lot of the bait and switch feelings. Yeah. So, every job has its challenges, right? And you're looking for folks who can work well within some kind of parameter. So, what are those challenges in your business? And being, as candid as you can while still selling the organization can really go a long way.
Yeah. That makes sense. So business challenges. I mean, what have you seen that ever done successfully where employers are real about themselves on the front end? So can you give me an example where you've ever seen that done, where an employer is not, not hesitant or I should say more willing to share on the front end about something that's a challenge for that employer, and that could be a killer for the retention rate of that employee if they didn't know about that ahead of time?
Yep, absolutely. So a recent example that we've had is one of our clients is growing very rapidly, and they're over doubling their employee base. So one of the pain points of that is, they didn't necessarily have all the policies and procedures in place. So someone coming into the organization at this point, we're very clear with them when we're talking to the candidates about, hey, this is the environment. They're still working on, getting all their processes in place and working through that. But if you are really looking for a very structured environment, this might be difficult for you right now. So people have been really grateful for that. We haven't had anybody yet say, nope, I absolutely cannot work in that, but at least they know when they go in what to expect.
Is that something you've actually talked about at all in the job descriptions at all, or do you do it during the interview?
Yeah, so sometimes we can pull that into the job description and the job postings, but then we absolutely make sure to mention that in the interview.
Yeah. That makes sense. Rose, with pay transparency on the rise, so many employers choosing to do it. What are some of the reasons you think some of these other employers aren't yet embracing the pay transparency, getting on the pay transparency train? What's preventing them from doing that, do you think?
Sure. So, from my experience, I think the biggest reason is employee pay equity. So internally, some organizations may have been able to kind of get away with lower wages. And when you're bringing on new employees and you're paying them more than, someone who's been there for a while or even just a couple of years, that can cause some real issues with your internal employee or your current employees. So I know a lot of organizations that with the wages, increasing now. They're working on getting their current employees stepped up to the new wage rates. And until they do that, there's this hesitation around, we don't want to advertise what we're bringing people in at because we don't have all of our current people there yet. I think that's a big factor.
Oh, that makes sense. I mean, yeah, you've got such a rise quickly over the last 2 years in pay. I can see a situation like you're talking about where internally already people that are already on the team haven't reached even the entry level wages. And so there's this process, especially bigger teams. I can imagine there's a lot of catching up to do before they start advertising the wages, so they don't lose anybody who might be upset at the lack of supposed fairness of the employer. Yeah, I could see that really being an issue. Are there any other issues you see preventing people from being on the pay transparency train?
I think there's some feelings of, the competitors. So they want to, you always want to be competitive, right? So whether you're talking about your customers or you're looking at candidates as customers. So it's kind of this, looking over your shoulder, well, what are they doing over there? So I think there's a little bit of hesitation maybe to be very transparent with pay because you want to remain competitive, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. Yep. We've heard that with some of our clients who were afraid before they went to be transparent, because then all of a sudden you've got all the others are matching you at the same level, and then you lose that. Perhaps you had a competitive advantage, and that's the perception people have. But I think the route, I just posted about this on LinkedIn, but I think the route people are expecting more and more is that you can't hide the pay ahead of time. I think a lot of employers want to keep that close to their chest. And unfortunately, prospective employees see that as, well, if you're going to hide that from me, what else potentially would you hide from me? It's a signal. We talk a lot about signals in marketing. What are you telling people by doing a certain action or not doing a certain action? And by doing a certain action that, for example, you're not telling people to pay up front, could signal, well, if you're not going to tell me something that's pretty darn basic for me to know, what else are you hiding from me that I would need to know? So for those employers who haven't yet, moved toward the model of getting everybody up to speed on their pay, that makes sense. But I know there's a lot of employers out there who are just still reticent to the idea that, it was very acceptable before the pandemic to do this, but I think the pandemic has kind of been a catalyst for a lot of changes, right? And this is one of those things that we're just seeing. It's becoming the minority of employers. If you want to survive in terms of getting quality applicants, you've got to put it out there. We've always heard, similar to what you said earlier, if somebody's dedicated to the job and passionate and blah, 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 they'll apply. It's about the job. It's not about the pay. Well, that's pretty, big-headed of someone to think that.
We all work for money, right? That's the purpose of
right.
For most of us.
But a great counter argument to that is, well, your best candidates don't have time to waste applying for jobs that they don't even know if the pay's decent or not. Why? Because they've got the pick of the litter. Why would they apply to a job when there's 5 to 10 other jobs plus? They can easily determine what the pay is and pick those and go for it. So it really is a lose for employers. They're not getting the best candidates by not sharing the pay, as has been supposed in the past. Rose, where are because we talk about we're talking about transparency. Where are candidates learning about employers these days? Because that is such a desire for people to learn about a workplace before you work there. People are going to spend a big chunk of their lives doing this job. They're going to spend, it's like a purchase. If you think about like a car purchase or a house purchase, those are pretty big purchases. We do a lot of research for those things. How much more research are people doing about jobs these days, right? So, where are you seeing candidates finding information about employers?
Yep, I think there's two main areas. So, it's not a secret that when you Google an employer or prospective employer, one of the first sites that comes up is Glassdoor, right? So we have these websites or organizations who are really they're going to give some sort of transparency, whether it's accurate or not. I've had, especially more frequently recently, I've had a lot of candidates who say, if they don't rate above a 3 in Glassdoor, I'm not even considering them. And which can be unfortunate, because I think there are a lot of employers who, probably, get a bad rap or bad reviews from, who knows, disgruntled employees or whatnot, but not going out and proactively, trying to change that image. It can be really detrimental. So I think Glassdoor, websites like that are very influential. But then the biggest one too, word of mouth.
Mm-hmm.
I know teenagers who are talking about, applying at places, very entry level places, fast food places, and they know, if they're going to get a response or not. They're talking about it. So word of mouth is just, it goes so far. And we know that from being consumers or, in marketing, like you had said earlier. And I see employers getting a little bit better at communication and speed to communication with candidates, or candidates they're interested in, I should say. There's still a lot of work to be done there, but there's a whole population of people that apply to your jobs that never hear anything for one reason or another. A lot of it can be time restraints on, your staff that are reviewing those resumes. But I believe there's a lot of, bad taste in people's mouths that come from that. So one thing our organization does is we really educate our clients, but then, we also have a service where we would help provide that communication back to those that maybe you're not interested in right now, but they're still out in the community. They're still talking about their experience with your organization, whether it's good or bad.
Gotcha. You said something about, these young folks talking with one another about the jobs, and that being a factor. Are they doing all of the above? Are they on the platforms? Are they talking with one another? Which one do you think is more of a factor? Word, referral or online?
Yeah, good question. I think it depends on the demographic and probably the type of position. But entry level roles, word of mouth is golden. Those are the folks that are talking, their family functions, their get-togethers with their friends, they're, out for their fish fries Friday night, and they're talking about, who's hiring, what it's like to work there, all that insider information. I think once you get into more positions, maybe more like professional type positions, office type positions, those types of things, that's when people are more inclined to go to Glassdoor or different websites. However, they are teaching now, kids in middle school are learning, do your research on a company, do your research on yourself, prepare yourself to make yourself look good in the light of an organization. So I do think that more and more of that younger, more entry level kind of population is turning to that technology.
Oh yeah, we're seeing a rise in that. I mean, even us here at Dialogue, that's one of the things we do is that proactive review management and soliciting reviews from the workforce. And it's a huge factor we're seeing for our employers. I mean, think about it. If you don't know anybody that works there, your only point of reference is Glassdoor or Indeed or even Google My Business, which isn't designed as a platform for job reviews, but people leave them there anyways. So yeah, it makes sense that it would only grow, especially for a screen adept generation that's just always had a phone apparently. And we're going to, they're going to depend on that maybe just as much or more in coming years. But yes, so many employers aren't aware of sometimes they're not even aware they have a presence on these review sites. And some we talk about a lot of Dialogue is claim your profile, respond to reviews, good and bad, and things like that. But it is a challenge. I mean, these are new things that a lot of HR teams, it ends up falling in the HR team's lap, and they've never done anything like this. So going back to the idea of transparency, I can see some employers thinking, well, what if we don't have the best pay or benefits? How does that help us to be transparent? What would you say to those folks?
Yeah. So what I have found to be the most beneficial is, go back to your employees, interview a subgroup of your employees, really find out why they work there. And we've all heard it, before, that it's not always about pay and benefits. So, you said we all work for pay, so there's some component there,
Yeah.
but there are other reasons why people work there. I have a great example with a organization we had worked with in manufacturing when typically when people were hired for this type of skilled position, they are responsible for one segment of the process. At this organization, they were responsible for the entire process, which sounds like it might not be a good thing, but we were able to pull that into their job post, and we really attracted the right candidate who has that ownership and says, yeah, I want to be responsible for the entire process because I don't want, Bob at the end of the line or whoever, making a mistake, and then it reflects poorly on all of us. They said, I'm really good at what I do. I want to be responsible for that. And the leadership team, never really thought about it that. They had the typical, like, well, we're flexible, the typical items, but that was a great little nugget that we were able to pull out. So I think if companies do more of those internal kind of interviews, it's really helpful. It's also really helpful if you have someone external come in and do that. Not just to give a plug, but but yeah, it's a fresh set of eyes that, isn't familiar with the ins and outs of your organization. And sometimes it's easier to identify those things.
Yeah, I've often heard it said, it's hard to see the label from the inside of the jar. So that's what you're talking about, is that set of fresh eyes coming in and giving you that perspective. Because there are gold nuggets. I like the way you put that, Rose. There are gold nuggets for every employer that is doing certain things a certain way. And even the pay and benefits aren't the best. Again, going back to being upfront about that. I mean, I can think of a company that's maybe earlier stage compared to a massive company. They're not going to be able to be competitive on wages or benefits per se. Maybe they can be competitive on wages, but maybe not the benefits. But as long as they're upfront about that, I think a lot of people, personality wise, are going to be attracted to an environment where they can, like you said, they can have more responsibility, they can have more independence, and that might be better for them than an environment where they're very much part of a cog in a very large machine. And so I think a lot of employers can take advantage of that as long as they're making sure they're telling that story. There's a little bit of identifying that, like you said, that employers have to do to be able to pull that out as a significant difference, a reason to choose this over the other, rather than let's hope people apply and then we'll get away with still getting okay candidates. I think there's an opportunity for a lot of employers to get great candidates if they are just able to flip the narrative, change the stories, find those gold nuggets, and really play those up as strengths, rather than maybe hiding them or being unaware of them.
Yep.
So let's say, Rose, somebody's, they don't have the best reputation. Their Indeed is 2.5 out of 5. Their rating, Glassdoor rating is 2.6. They've burned some people, but they're trying to change that. What's some advice you'd give to that company in terms of helping them with their recruiting?
Sure. So we've seen this quite a bit, especially as of late. And it really goes back to, that honesty, transparency, highlight the steps that you have taken. And you don't have to go into extreme detail, but, what did you have a really bad plant manager? And not that you would say, we replaced our plant manager, but you could have some kind of a statement around, hey, we understand that this is this area that we struggled in, and we are taking steps to rectify that. Even having a group or a subgroup of people outside of the management team or leadership team who can testify to some of those changes really goes a long way. And I've seen companies incorporate that group in a few different ways. So either make a video so you can, easily share it, or have them actually participate in the interview. So when or if questions come up or there's a situation that comes up, they can quickly, testify to their experience. Or even have them talk one-on-one with candidates who do have a specific concern. That's gone a long way. Talking to a peer is a big difference, and just the message that it sends that you're willing to have your current employees, you're willing to take that time and invest in your candidates to allow them to talk to each other goes a long way.
Yeah, that makes sense. So if I were to make a list of transparency tips from Rose, you mentioned a couple. I want to get you started, but what else would you add on there? So you mentioned things like, in the interview, include some of the people like the new manager and get them in there. Maybe get some testimonials and publish those out on your website or social media. What are some other transparency tips you'd have, Rose?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest ones is put aside your ego. We all know every company is not perfect. So, don't let your ego get in the way of your business. If you're making changes, be proud of those changes and own those changes and own the, growth that you have from those experiences. And I think just being, really just honest with your population goes a very long way. Train your managers. So when they are interviewing, when they are talking to people, they know what is appropriate to say and what's not appropriate to say. We see it quite often where, managers aren't necessarily trying to be not transparent or deceitful or anything. They just don't know if they can share or if they, are able to share something. So, train your managers on how to approach that with candidates.
That makes a ton of sense. So like empowering them with what they can share rather than leaving them in the dark. And they're gonna, anyone especially in a middle management role is gonna feel kind of reticent about oversharing, like what can I share, what can I not share? So taking a intentional step of, hey, we want you to share anything you want about this workplace. Here's some things that, for examples of it, or maybe you're not that generous. Maybe there are some off-topic things like maybe competitor issues. I don't know, but you at least do the benefit of training your people, empowering them is what I would say with what they can share. It's a good idea. Well, two more questions I'd like to ask everybody is Rose, what just gets your blood boiling when it comes to recruiting? It just gets you mad.
Lack of communication drives me insane. And whether that is, the company communicating with the clients or the company communicating with the recruiters or candidates back and forth, and you see it quite often, especially now in the employee driven market where, employers are kind of like, you ghost us, and employees are saying, well, you ghost us and we don't hear anything back. And it's like, can we just keep that communication open and treat each other with respect? That's the biggest thing for me. Yeah.
The ghosting, the lack of communication seems to have been, it's trending up in terms of everywhere, both from employers and employees. Yeah, that makes sense. So what's something you're hopeful about, something that gets you excited for the future?
This isn't rocket science, right? So these are easy-ish changes that we can make. We're hearing in all aspects of our lives, treat each other with respect, be open, be honest, be kind, be good to each other, have those be part of your core values. I think I'm really hopeful that we're going to see a lot more of that. We have to, right? Because those employers that aren't doing that are feeling it, especially right now. So I am hopeful that, we'll match up those great employees with those great employers And those who, choose to adopt that kind of mindset are going to be really successful.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Makes sense. Well, Rose, thanks for being here and talking with me today. Where can people learn more about you?
Yeah, so you can visit www.newtalentsolutions.com. They can find us on Facebook. There's not a whole lot out there right now, but more will be coming very soon. They can also find our contact information on our website. You can email me directly if you even just want to chat about it. I love talking about recruiting, so I'm happy to talk with anyone or give a free consultation. So you can give me a call. My number is 920-360-2526,
All right.
and we can chat.
We'll get that contact information on the post as well. Thank you, Rose, for your time today. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Justin.